Wild swimming and ice baths are a big trend at the moment, and I'm not a fan of either. And yet I do and have done both. I'm not a fan because I know that when my body gets into that water, be it full of ice or just cold water, that it screams, "Get out, what the hell are you doing?" But I also know that when I take control of my breath, when I relax, that in that discomfort, that moment, things will shift, something will change. It's in those moments that the magic begins to happen. Welcome to another episode of Coming to Your Senses, where we talk about navigating the labyrinth of the mind and emerging victorious. This is a place for us to have those kinds of conversations where we challenge thinking and can change our lives. Now, I'm actually not going to talk much more about ice baths and wild swimming because it is something that I occasionally do. But the key of using that as an analogy, I'm sure even if you haven't been wild swimming or ice baths, you will have got into a shower that's been cold or suddenly turned cold and had that experience. It's uncomfortable. We want to get out of it. And yet, what I know and what this episode is about is why feeling that discomfort and being uncomfortable is actually your key to personal growth. Whatever it is that you want to change in that your life, if there's something that you're wanting to transition from or to, or really want to transform things, then the only way, in my experience, is through and with that experience of discomfort, because it's doing things differently. Now, I've been professionally doing personal development for more than 20 years now. And I have been doing it non-professionally, i.e. just for myself, for somewhere between 25 and 30 years. And in that time, I have been on many retreats, be that yoga retreats, exercise retreats, detox retreats, juice retreats, spiritual, personal development, silent retreats. I've done numerous ones over the years. And every single time, it doesn't matter which kind of one that I've gone on, and whether it's been for a weekend or whether it's been for, I think the longest one I've done is 2 weeks, is that I know that at some point during that immersive process of going through something, that I know there's going to be some level of discomfort. And for some of it, it's been okay. It's been kind of mild discomfort, but others it's been to the point of such a level of intensity that I've questioned my own sanity. But actually, on the other side of even the smallest of discomfort has always been the opportunity for growth. And yet what I notice is that we often avoid discomfort. But it's that point of where we can unlock the patterns that we've been running, the habits, the unconscious and non-conscious thinking that may be keeping us in the same thing that actually we want to get away from. But that thing that we want to get away from has become so quote unquote comfortable that we are so uncomfortable with going to what else could be there. And also, I think what we don't talk about very often, because we talk about it being the comfort zone, and as I've mentioned on the podcast before, I think that's misnamed. I think it really needs to be called the known zone, so that we can acknowledge what's outside of that isn't simply discomfort, it's stuff that's unknown. And then we can work towards how we can move from the known to the unknown in a far more open, resourced, resilient, and it still may be uncomfortable way, but it's an opportunity there to move forward. Now, from a primal perspective, it makes total sense why discomfort is perceived as a avoidance mechanism. You know, if something's uncomfortable, get away from it. It makes absolute sense from a primal perspective, because it's an indication of something that's not safe, and therefore we need to get safe. But so often the discomfort that we're experiencing actually isn't about a primal functionality. It tends to be much more around our psychology than it does our physiology. And that can be a societal thing that we've learned. So, for example, one of the things I know many people have a challenge with and are uncomfortable with actually root back to our experience in the education system. So whether that was about reading aloud, speaking aloud, being in front of people, raising your hand, being in groups of people, be them small or large. And it's really interesting that societal influence has then conditioned us to be a certain way. And often that's associated with shame and blame and judgment and concerns around those things, that it then we associate discomfort with actually weakness and failure. And I think that's a misunderstanding, that's not, or I think it's rarely the case actually, that there's failure or weakness in being uncomfortable. I think it's the complete opposite the majority of the time, both in my personal and professional experience. So we need to become more aware of the opportunity that lies within that discomfort, being uncomfortable. It's an opportunity, but when we end up avoiding it, it can stop us from having those difficult conversations, even with people that whether we like them or don't like them, whether we're in close relationships with them or not. We can go into a point of avoidance rather than embracing the opportunity to have that difficult conversation. It can mean that we end up staying doing the same jobs because they are the known, the quote unquote safe thing that we look for that security. And it makes sense. This is no point of judgment from my perspective. And that whether that's a job or even a relationship, and that might be an intimate partner, but that may be a friendship as well. I think for me these days, when I'm talking about relationships, I'm talking about and including friendships within there, because I think that's an aspect of relationships that is very, very valued by the majority of people, and yet we don't kind of talk about it in the same way. But that's a different topic. I'll come back to that at another point. But we end up staying in those because we don't have those difficult conversations, and actually that's not helpful. Or we simply get stuck in habits and routines because they're known, because they're the quote unquote comfortable thing that we do over and over again. And that may be going to the same place to get our coffee from, taking the same route, wearing a similar or same clothing, doing the same thing every day without challenging, without doing something just that little bit different. It's part of being human, is the experience of that discomfort. It's normal, it's usual. So it's not something I think that we need to be avoiding in the way that we are. It's not bad. It's just about checking whether it's actually factual, and whether it's helpful. Because if I'm in physical discomfort, then that might mean that my physical body needs attention. But if it's a psychological thing, then is it something that I can address myself? Can I go and talk to somebody informally, friend, family member, somebody like that? Or do I need to go and chat with a professional to be able to look at this in a different way?
If you've listened to the first episode of Coming to Your Senses, you'll know that in the early 2000s, I experienced a breakdown. I tried different therapies, but it was coaching that truly helped me transform my life. Initially, when I discovered coaching, though, I couldn't afford it. And it was a kind soul who sponsored me not only to have coaching, but also to train and become a coach. And my promise to them was that I would pay it forward. And I've done that in many ways over the years, initially through social media and private Facebook group called Confidence Revolution, and also through Coming to Your Senses, the podcast. But it triggered for me a passion to really want to make and create a secure, supportive space for people to be able to come together and have conversations that transform their lives. So I created the Conscious Conversations community. It's a group where we meet on more than once a month, and we have a focused theme which is guided by the community and facilitated by me. There's hundreds of hours of learning and resources and materials to help you transform your life in a like-minded space. Because I get passionate about it, and because this was my promise to pay it forward, I'm offering you the opportunity to trial it for £1 for the first month. If that appeals to you, then head to juleswyman.online/conscious conversations offer. juleswyman.online/conscious conversations offer to explore what's available for you through being part of a conscious community?
From my perspective, and I am going to talk from a place of I know this. And when I'm saying that, please recognize that I'm talking about my own personal experience and what I witness with clients, whether that's at the retreats, whether that's one-to-one, whether that's in trainings, whether that's in the conscious conversations community, is that I'm speaking from that point of knowing, quote unquote, because that is my known experience. That's my lived experience on a day-to-day basis. And what I notice is that discomfort is so often an indication. It's a great way of just looking and going, oh, hang on a second, this could be a sign of growth. This could be a sign of I'm just stretching beyond, I'm going into new limits. I'm stretching what I've known before into a different realm. And that's neither good or bad. It's just an acknowledgement of that's what is. And from my perspective, I know that when I think a breakthrough for me was around, and I often talk about this with public speaking being, I'm doing a podcast now. I would never have done anything like this when I first started out in business, and probably for quite a while actually, because to me that the discomfort of speaking, of being in front of people, being seen, putting something out there was, had the opportunity to get it wrong. And I wanted to make sure I got it right. People are going to judge it because, some of you are going to love this conversation and some of you are going to hate this conversation. And you're probably going to share your opinions in the comments, which I welcome now, but I wouldn't have done before. But now that level of discomfort can give me the opportunity. The shift for me was when I realized that it's okay to be uncomfortable and vulnerable at the same time and still do something. All of those things can coexist. It's not, I have to be 100% confident and I'm always going to get it right. And therefore, then I move forward with something. I can be uncomfortable and still do something. So, my psychological discomfort, the thinking that I've got around something, the work in progress for me is to not let that stop me from doing something, whether that is having that difficult conversation, whether that is doing something like public speaking, whether that's asking for help. That's been a big thing for me. And I have shared that a number of times on the podcast. But it's about recognizing that, for example, with the difficult conversation, and I think that I'm speaking about that because I've done that even in the last, probably 6 to 8 months, I've actually either instigated or been part of one at least 3 times. And what I've noticed is that even though it might be uncomfortable, I'm alive. I've had that difficult conversation and they've all ended in different ways. But I'm here. I'm still here. There may be things that still need to be sorted out with at least one that I'm thinking of, but I'm still here. I'm physically still here. I'm still functioning. I'm still alive. I'm getting by day to day. So there's many, many situations, even calling time on my marriage. That was one of the most difficult things I'd ever done. And yet, look, I'm still here. We can all do uncomfortable things. And I'm pretty sure that you have, especially the ones that are really emotional. So what you can do to practice that, for example, is test it out with somebody that you are close with that has your back, is test it out. First of all, this is what I want to say, or this is how I want to do this. Can you help me? Can you help me guide it, navigate it? The biggest discomfort for me, and something that obviously I see because I earn my living as a coach, but my personal biggest discomforts have been in my coaching sessions with my coach. And oh my gosh, for far too long, I fought against that and pushed back and didn't want to go there, quote unquote. But now it's to the point that I remember, actually not that long ago, I got on a call with my coach and I was already in floods of tears before he even said anything, because there was something very, very at the forefront of my mind that I wanted to talk about. And it was an intense situation. And I heard myself say, I know this is really uncomfortable. I am so squirming at the moment, and I don't really want things to be the way that they are. And yet I'm excited that I'm in this kind of situation, because I know from experience that this is where growth will happen. I know that on the other side of this, as much as I'm a snot bubble in that particular moment as I was, I know that growth exists on the other side of that. So I know it's okay to be uncomfortable now. And that's the invitation. That's what I'm inviting you to do, is shift yourself from that thinking of avoidance of I have to get away from this because this is really uncomfortable, is actually recognize that that's where, if you genuinely want your life to be different, and if you're listening to this podcast until this point, then my guess is you want your life to be different. And no matter how big or small that change may be, you might want to just change a small habit, or it may be that you want a real life transformation. It doesn't matter. Either way, you're going to have to face some level of discomfort. And what I often think about with this, I used this analogy last week, actually, when I was running my first retreat of 2025, my Time to Be retreat last week. And we started off one of the mornings with a meditation, and I'd been sat explaining various things that we were going to do beforehand. And I was sat cross-legged, and then went to start the meditation. And within a couple of minutes, I noticed a sensation in my hip joints. But instead of doing a quick movement of, oh, that's uncomfortable, I can feel that sensation, is I sat with it for a while and I breathed into it to just check. Because the thinking can make up, especially when we're doing something like a meditation, it can make up a physical sensation in order to try and distract us from the process of meditation. So I know that thinking can do that, and I've experienced that many, many times. So I just paused and just checked, where was this sensation coming from? Was it being constructed in the mind? I've been sat here for a long time in cross-leg position. I'm sure my legs are hurting by now. That kind of construction, which would have still or could have still been a physical experience. But was that true? Was that real? Or was it a genuine physical experience? And becoming discerning around that takes practice. But I experienced that and realized that actually this is a genuine physical sensation that needs attention. Now, if you've ever done any form of exercise, doesn't matter what it is, walking, running, cycling, yoga, it really doesn't matter. But if you've got to the point where your body has gone, ouch, that's really not comfortable, I bet I'm thinking about when I had a conversation with a friend who's an ultra distance runner. And I remember her saying, I always check first by running to the next lamppost. Let me run to the next. Am I really done? Or can I run to the next lamppost? And in that run to the next lamppost, she's checking that the physical sensation, is it something that is actually really physical and needs attention? Or is it just the thinking mind going, I'm done now? And she said, so often I can go to not just that next lamppost, but the one after that, and the one after that, and the one after that. And realizing that it's just the thinking mind going, I don't like this. I don't want to be doing this. And it can do that. I've experienced that in yoga, or I've experienced that in the gym. I've experienced that many, many times where thinking just goes, I don't want to be doing this. But actually, when you go, let me just do another 5 minutes, or let me just do it, it gives you an opportunity, whatever that time frame or distance might be, to just check whether it genuinely is a physical sensation that needs attention, or whether it's the thinking making something up. Because that discomfort, the thinking doesn't like discomfort. It wants to avoid it all the time. And I noticed this, and I think one of the most intense experiences that I've noticed this was when I was doing silent retreats, as in that I went to, I don't know how many silent retreats I've been on now, but I noticed my discomfort. And I remember the very, very first one I went on, I thought I'd be okay. You know, there's no distractions allowed, no writing, no listening to music, no doing exercise. And what I noticed, and it was really funny, was I think it was like day 2 or day 3, I was in the shower and I realized I was talking out loud to myself. Now, I don't do that normally, But it was so interesting that it was like, oh, there's so much discomfort here that the thinking's going, let me just say something. I want to get something. I want to distract from this silence. And I noticed this a lot last week at the retreat. So at the Time to Be retreat, the retreat is different every single time because I base it on the people that are there. It's always a small group of people, usually around 7 people, sometimes a few more, sometimes a few less. And you fill in a questionnaire beforehand, and then the retreat, I create the retreat based on your desires for that retreat. So we were doing a specific exercise, which I've never done before at the retreat, based on those people's needs. And part of it, there was three people in each group. One person was asking a question, the other person was answering that specific question, and then the third person was writing down the person's answers, and then everyone would swap round. But what I noticed is I was sat near some of the groups so I could hear what was being said. And what I noticed was the person answering the question, because they were speaking out loud, when they were thinking, they were often going quiet. Now, the person asking the question obviously could repeat the question, so they had the opportunity to speak. But the person writing down wasn't saying anything because their job was simply to write down the answers. And pretty much every single person, when they got to them in that point of the group, was really uncomfortable with not having any input. I want to say something. I want to help the person who can't come up with an answer right now. Maybe I could suggest this, or wanting to go into coach mode themselves of let's dive a bit deeper. And there's nothing wrong with that usually, but that's not the context of the exercise that we were doing. So we did other moments of just getting look without judgment. This isn't about judging yourself. It's about awareness. And one of my favorite quotes is an Anthony DeMello quote around this, which is, what you're aware of, you have control of, but what you're unaware of has control of you. So if we want to make change in our life, we've got to be aware that if we don't see that discomfort and how that discomfort can distract us and might lead us to avoidance or procrastination, whatever you want to label it as, that actually it's going to stop us making the changes that we want to make. Again, doesn't matter how big or small those changes are. So what I often encourage people to do, especially when it comes to something like noticing your discomfort with silence, is no judgment, just breathe and notice the internal dialogue that's going on and just keep breathing. Don't say anything, just bring your attention to your breath and see what happens from there. And what I have found really helpful is at the appropriate point is to then articulate, I'm having or have had uncomfortable thinking around being silent. I've had thoughts that have made it difficult for me to experience silence. And what I can see from that is by being with that, I have an opportunity to learn and grow because I can see something, can have an awareness of something that I didn't beforehand. Something else that I have found a helpful thing to do is journaling is a great thing. I personally am not the disciplined person to journal every day, but every so often I'll pick up and I'll write pages and pages and pages, and I'll do that for a period of time and then I'll stop. And I know there's some people that are really disciplined and they do a daily journal. But for me, it's those moments of spotting that, for example, being you could label it something like a growth journal, but if you took the time to recognize I did something different there that I wouldn't have done before and I was uncomfortable. And I remember when I was invited to do BBC Breakfast Television, I remember being stood outside the studio and being so internally in discomfort about, because I didn't know really what they were going to ask me and I didn't really know how, therefore then what answers do I need to give? I couldn't really prepare like a speech or anything. But I remember just slowing my breathing down and getting very, very grounded, looking at the sunrise outside the window and just calming myself and going, it's okay to not know. It's okay to do this. It's okay to be uncomfortable and go and do this thing that's new, that's different, that I have no control over. and making a note of that afterwards and getting very clear about that moment so that I could then go, see, those two things can coexist. I can still have discomfort and have the courage to do something as well, have something to do something different. So that's a really helpful process to do. Have that growth journal, if you want to label it as that. And as I say, having those different difficult conversations, and what I've begun to notice is even getting clear for myself that I want to have that difficult conversation and what the purpose is. So for me, I'm always looking to make sure it's not a point of judgment or blame or anything like that. I want to go in from a neutral perspective. That actually, even the clarity of doing that has helped shift something for me. So that can be really helpful, writing that down and then capturing that as well as part of your growth journal. Also having the opportunity to share your intentions. I mentioned earlier, talk things out with those that are close to you. If you're going to be doing something that's uncomfortable, have that bit of a practice. And I think that's where being part of a community is really helpful. It's one of the reasons I set up the Conscious Conversations community. It's one of the things that I love about the retreats, because you're with a group of people that are all there they've all got the same intention, which is to be there and learn and grow for themselves. And in the 12, 13 years that I've been doing them, and I think I've run about 15 or 16, maybe more actually, because I've done a few years where I've done more than one, is that actually everyone supports each other. It's so beautiful. I've never really understood quite the magic behind it, but that's where the magic happens. Got this group of people, the majority of time they don't know each other, and yet by the end of it they're besties and swapping contact details and have really deep, meaningful, supportive conversations with each other. So having that support around you, and that could be one person, and it could be multiple people, it could be an online community or in person. It's so valuable to do that for yourself so that you can test the water in relation to being uncomfortable. And for me, the thing that I have sort of taken on as a mantra more and more as I've got older, and I think the growth journal has really helped me with this. Although I don't always write it down, I do capture those moments mentally for myself. I clock them. Is that it's always courage over comfort. Always courage over comfort. So the Nepal trip, physically one of the most demanding things I've ever done. And yet all I kept saying to myself, it's a bit like my one lamppost that my friend had told me about. It's like, I just need to get to the next top. I just need to get to the next bit. I just need to get to the next bit each and every time. And funnily enough, I did. So it's really important to recognize that. And having that clarity between what's physically going on, the accuracy of that versus what the thinking is telling you. So what I'm wanting to share, what I'm wanting to drive home in this podcast today is that discomfort's not an enemy. It's just a sign. It's just an indication that either there's something physical that needs your attention, or you're at a point of possible growth. But to have the point of possible growth, you're going to need to go through that to get to the other side. As my coach often says, everyone wants to get to heaven, but very few are prepared to walk through hell to get there. And I think that's such a key thing for us to remember. So I'd love to know your thoughts. Wherever platform you're watching this on, listening to this, then please share your thoughts. Hit that applause button, as I'm now liking to refer to it. Make sure that you share this with somebody who maybe is going through that point of discomfort, to give them that reminder that there is growth on the other side. That's been my experience, both professionally and personally, over the nearly 30 years now of doing this for myself and with others. So join the community of having this conversation. This is what the point of it is, and giving us the opportunity to be a support for each other. I hugely appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen through and get what you need from this conversation. Remember to stay curious, embrace discomfort, and enjoy the process of coming to your senses.